For the second year in a row, the Toronto Blue Jays have made it to the American League Championship Series. But not everyone is happy about this. The Blue Jays' opponents in this series have offended the Ontario Human Rights Commission. And I know what you're thinking, that probably doesn't take much. But they're trying to enforce their virtue signaling on broadcasters. Why? Well, because the Blue Jays are set to play the Cleveland Indians. And many social justice warriors want the Indians to change their name and logo. So the Ontario Human Rights Commission thinks broadcasters should just call them the Cleveland Baseball Club all series long. Yesterday, it was revealed that Blue Jays radio voice Jerry Howarth has not used the term Indians on air since 1992, when he received a letter from an Aboriginal fan after the Blue Jays played the Atlanta Braves in the 1992 World Series. I respect that personal choice of Jerry's. Heck, I hadn't even noticed, despite listening and watching to Blue Jays games for over 20 years myself. But that's the difference when you have a social justice warrior, including their leader in the form of the Ontario Human Rights Commission, piling on all broadcasters to drop the name. Even politicians weighed in. Former one-term Premier of Ontario and federal Liberal Bob Rae tweeted, quote, "Cleveland's name and logo for their baseball team is so bad we need to beat them just for that reason alone. Offensive stereotype." Offensive name? Have you ever looked up our own set of laws governing Indigenous Canadians? What's it called again? Oh yeah, the Indian Act. There's that word, Indian. So in your two separate sessions as a sitting MP, you never once, even symbolically, tried to change our Indian Act to remove this so-called offensive term, did you, Mr. Rae? Because it's so much easier for these social justice warriors to take on a team name like the Cleveland Indians and their mascot Chief Wahoo than to fight for real changes in our Indigenous communities. But what about Cleveland Indians fans? Well, they love Chief Wahoo. And the history of the name and mascot was actually to honor the first Native American to ever play Major League Baseball, Chief Louis Sox Alexis, who way back in 1897 hit .338 with 20 extra base hits and 16 stolen bases, the best of his 3 seasons with the club. And those aren't bad offensive numbers for the late 1800s, and he was by no means a publicity stunt. So where does this stop? Where does the so-called racist name scrubbing end? Well, history and tradition matter to sports fans, and the Indians are no exception. Would the epic highlights of their incredible hitters during the 1990s be buried because Kenny Lofton was wearing Indians across his jersey? And would the home run prowess of Albert Bell and Jim Thome be forgotten because Chief Wahoo was on their hat? Trying to force private businesses like sports franchises to change their name is the epitome of politically motivated censorship. And we must remember that freedom of speech and freedom of expression must be defended, even when it is offensive. But with all that being said, of course, I hope the Toronto Blue Jays thoroughly trounce the Cleveland Indians over the weekend. For the Rebel.media, I'm Christopher Wilson.